Hi everybody, Steve Griffiths here, developer of the MTPredictor software program. In today's MTPredictor video, I'd like to look at what constitutes our MTPredictor Holy Grail trade setup with an almost perfect example on the Dax that's been unfolding today, which is July the 6th. But as usual, let's start with our risk disclaimer and just remind you that all examples in these videos should be considered as hypothetical. No trades are actually taken. They're just shown for illustration and training purposes only. I'd also like to remind you there's a risk of loss of trading and investing. I'll put that another way. All professional traders know, understand, and more importantly accept that losses can and will and do happen. The trick is keeping those losses small when they come through. And all trade decisions are your own sole responsibility. Right, let's have a look at the DAX on a 3-minute chart on how it's unfolded today. And here you can see our TS3 HG, which stands for Holy Grail Trade Setup, unfolding here a bit earlier this morning. So what was the result of this? I just want to show you where the Holy Grail Trade Setup actually unfolded, because there's actually a history triangle underneath here because there's a double top on those two bars. So I just want to use our training mode and jump back to here to show you where this setup actually unfolded. So I'll just move forward bar by bar. Here's our first potential setup. Now I say potential because if I right mouse click on the red cell bar to analysis, you can see this is where our sell order would be, and if filled, that's where our protective stop would be. Remember, we use correct position sizing. In this case, I'm looking at a 20,000 euro account. If you wanted, you could then change that to our dollar account and the risk is then calculated. You can see we automatically adjust the tick size or the tick value based on your account currency. So there it's in dollars. Let's take it back to euros, which obviously is 12.5 euros for the DAX. So this was the first potential trade setup. Let's move forward one bar. Now can you see here what's happened is that we've actually exceeded the stop trigger, in other words the sell order for the protective stop before you actually entered the short trade. In other words, the first trade setup was removed off the chart because there was no need to keep it on because the trade was not entered. Exactly the same thing happens here. We right mouse click, do our analysis. Let's jump forward one bar. And this is what's happened. Can you see we have a history triangle here because there was a double top. There's a double top, but that means that that bar was not exceeded. The high was not exceeded, so the stop trigger was not exceeded. So that trade was not invalidated. But then we entered short at 55.5 at basically the low of that bar. We then go forward and you can see we had another Holy Grail trade set up on that red cell bar there, but obviously we're already in a short trade there. Again, correct position sizing, varies the number of lots, contracts in this case, or shares to keep your initial risk small and under control. In this case, less than 2% of a sample 20,000 euro account. If I turn training mode off, you can see that this would have been our target. The target for a Holy Grail trade setup is the typical Wave 3 WPT, and I'll show you why that is a bit later in this video. But as you can see, the DAX declined nicely, got to the first target where a profit of just over 10.7 or 10R profit was available. In other words, the profit was 10 times, just over 10 times the initial risk required to take the trade. This is why I like these trade setups and why I've nicknamed them the Holy Grail. Not because they have a high percentage of winners, but because when the profits come through, they're large. Not just large in dollar or euro values in this case, they're large in relation to the initial risk required to take the trade. So when losses come through, and obviously they will, as we said right at the start of the video, the losses are kept small. In this case, when we hit the first target, our MTP trend was strong. In other words, it's beyond our strength band. So you could have actually swapped to the ATR stop to run the trade. If you'd done that, you'd have run it down here, 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 and then you'd have been stopped out about here for a profit of approximately 14R. So an absolutely amazing trade. So what is the Holy Grail trade setup? Well, it catches the end of a wave 2 just before a strong wave 3. Let me go out to the 5-minute chart and you can see this pattern a little bit clearer. Here we are. Here's the start of the sequence. The initial move down is wave 1. The initial move up is wave 2. That subdivides into a minor ABC. An ABC pattern is most commonly found in a wave 2. You can see there I did the Elliott wave tool in MTPredictor to find that ABC. It then goes down 3 for wave 5. So if I right mouse click on the bottom here, do Elliott wave intermediate, you can see the entire sequence. As a PS, you can see that actually it went on to a wave 5 with the low right there, right at the minimum wave 5 WPT nicely. But this is what we're focusing on. We're focusing on an ABC correction into a wave 2. Why? Because then after a wave 2 follows a wave 3, and the wave 3 is the strongest and longest wave in a completed 5-wave sequence. You can see it very clearly in this example that this swing down here is by far longer than the wave 1 and by far longer than the wave 5. So in other words, we're looking to come in on an ABC correction at the end of the wave 2 to catch the strongest and longest swing, i.e. a wave 3. If I now go back down to the 3-minute chart, you can see that's exactly what we caught. Whereas here's the start of the sequence, there's the initial move down, here's the initial correction into our TS3 Holy Grail trade setup, here's our target, the typical wave 3 WPT. In other words, this is the most likely area where wave 3s tend to end. In this case, this wave 3 went on a bit further and actually went right the way down to the maximum wave 3 WPT. Right the way down there. But either way, you can see that that was the strongest and longest move. How do we define the start of this? Well, ideally for the more experienced users among you, you should go out to the higher time frame chart. In this case, it would be the 15-minute chart. Let's zoom out a bit, and you can see that the DAX has basically been chopping sideways at a resistance level all the way along here. So why did the DAX having trouble getting through that level? Well, if we go back, we can see that this here is the last swing into the low. This is a trick we use in MTPredictor a lot. In other words, we use the DP from the last swing into a high or low. So this is the low, this is the last swing into the high or low. So we go back to the start of that last swing, which is there, right mouse click, do decision point, and this is an area of where resistance will normally be found. And can you see how that's exactly what the DAX has done? It's gone up into this level and bounced off it several times. In other words, it hasn't been able to break through it. So now, if I go back to the 3-minute chart, here's the Holy Grail trade setup. So there we start the sequence at the higher time frame resistance. Here's the initial move down, which is wave 1. Here's the initial correction in an ABC into a wave 2. We then look to trade the wave 3, which then gives us a large profit in relation to the initial risk. So hopefully this has been a great example of the Holy Grail trade setup and MTPredictor on the DAX this morning. And as you can see, if we trail with the ATR stop, it would have been approximately a 14-hour profit, turning approximately €375 risk into just over 5,300 euros. Or even if you came out of the typical wave 3 WPT target, the profit will be still 10 times greater than the initial risk. So again, this is why I've nicknamed it the Holy Grail, not because it has a high percentage of winners, but because it's when the trade works out as anticipated, the profit is large, not just large in dollar value, but large in relation to the initial risk. And again, what we're looking to find is, as we've already seen, if I go out to the 5-minute chart, is an ABC correction into a wave 2 to catch the end of the wave 2 to then trade the wave 3, and that is normally the longest and strongest wave, as you can see in this example, in a completed 5-wave sequence, and that's why we've nicknamed it the Holy Grail trade setup. And there we go, an absolutely perfect example unfolding on the DAX this morning. Just wait till that loads. There we go, it is again. There. So a great example of the MTPredictor Holy Grail trade setup. Also, our MTP trend was grey or black at the time, so it was a perfect valid trade setup to take, particularly as it was coming off hard time frame resistance there earlier in the day. These are the kind of trade setups you want to take, and actually this particular trade setup was why MTPredictor was created in the first place back in 2001, which is what 16 years ago now, and it's one of my favourite trade setups in the software.